So this is a really good article in The Independent. I think it highlights a lot of the stuff that is going on that just goes completely unreported. And I have a friend in this town, he experiences this on a daily basis. But again, this doesn't get reported in the news. So the story is from The Independent, the 12 Pakistani men from Rotherham you probably haven't heard about. The Rotherham 12 defence campaign shows how media sensationalism and dangerous political rhetoric can lead to injustice. If after reading the headline for one reason or another, you presume that this has something to do with child sexual exploitation, CES, because of the mere mention of a group of Pakistani men from Rotherham, then you haven't learned the lesson, lesson number 1 in structural racism. The presumption of guilt is based on stereotype of race. These 12 Pakistani men, who later became known as part of the Rotherham 12 defence campaign, were all charged with violent disorder and not CES, but that's why you've probably never heard of them. The Rotherham 12 defence campaign highlights how media sensationalism and dangerous political rhetoric leads to injustice and makes justice a political act, not a legal one. The Rotherham 12 defence campaign had its final 2 members on trial this week at Sheffield Crown Court, where the case against them collapsed. This is the 12 Pakistani men whose homes were raided in the early hours of morning of the September 2015 by dozens of police officers as if they were a threat to national security. So what did these men do to deserve a dawn raid and serious criminal charges? Well, on the 5th September 2015, they attended an anti-fascist fascist march after the racist murder of an 80-year-old Muslim Abed in their town. This is one of the things I have said continuously that never gets brought up by these people. On the same day, Britain First also staged a protest, and hundreds of police were deployed to keep the marches separate. When the police channeled the anti-fascist march down a road that had a pub on it frequented by far-right protesters, a clash between the two groups occurred after racist abuse was hurled. This followed months of the community feeling besieged and afraid to leave their homes due to the incessant far-right marches in the city. Only one punch was thrown, yet all 12 men were arrested, charged and put on trial. During the trial, the prosecution made clear that the other side had started the clash, but the actions of the 12 men could not be justified as self-defence. This was all rubbished in court, and all of the men have now been acquitted after 3 years of hell. So why are you only just finding out about this horrendous situation now? Let me say for what it is. The rise of Islamophobia in Rotherham. The people of Rotherham have been subjected to vile verbal abuse on the streets, in schools and in the town centre, bomb threats to mosques, 14 far-right demonstrations within a year, radicalising a local community. Innocent taxi drivers have been forced into intensive care units. The murder of an 81-year-old grandfather who was walking to the mosque, and the wrongful arrest of these 12 men. You have never heard about them because it isn't newsworthy. The attitude of some was affected. That is to say, in the least, this community deserved after the grooming gang scandal. Now all these men must pay a price. Call it extreme, but that's how it feels when all the above have been neglected by politicians and most of the mainstream media. As one of the founding members of the Rotherham 12 Defence Campaign, I can attest that apart from the likes of the Hillsborough Justice Campaign, the Orgreave Truth and Justice Campaign, Stand Up to Racism, Unite Against Fascism, and the other few groups, these innocent Pakistani men from Rotherham were viewed as not worth standing up for. Also, we all remember why child sex child sexual exploitation was so prevalent in Rotherham. It was because the police were too scared to make arrest due to political correctness, wasn't it? I'm sorry, but this is far from the truth, and it is incredibly far from the truth. We've gone over this in a video. Even the current top cop in South Yorkshire is on the record saying that political correctness played no part in their past failures. Nevertheless, to deflect from their own incompetence, South Yorkshire Police had now to show everyone that they were getting tough on the Pakistani community to make up for previous shortcomings. At least that's how it's feels. At least that's how it feels when after 14 far-right violent demonstrations and scuffles with the police, as well as attacking local businesses, mosques and other property, not a single violent disorder charge was brought forward against those marches. And then the one time a local Pakistani community comes out in defence to attend the vigil of a murdered 80-year-old man, they were attacked by the far right and 12 of them were charged. This clearly demonstrates a double standard that was applied. All in all, the facts speak for themselves. 12 Pakistani men claimed they defended themselves and none are found guilty. 7 white far-right protesters are charged and 4 eventually sentenced for violent disorder. Many institutional leaders, including the local MP, agreed with calls for a public inquiry once the trials are over. And now they're over, we're calling for the inquiry. But the question remains, will those institutional leaders raise their voices now? And this is one of the things I've talked about a couple of times when it comes to this type of thing. In Rotherham, the amount, ever since that whole child sexual abuse scandal, and I've covered it several times. We even read the report on camera. We went through the report piece by piece, and that is specifically, and he gets it right. The head cop from South Yorkshire literally said political correctness did not play a part in our act of basically not acting. It basically came down to the police just weren't interested in investigating it. That's why it went for so long, on for so long. That's why those girls were ignored. But that's not how it's portrayed. Even Sargon of Akkad, to this day, says that it was to do with political correctness. And there are other YouTubers from the UK that claim this as well. And even Breitbart still claims that to this day. Milo Yiannopoulos still claims that to this day. Paul Joseph Watson still claims all of them have one thing in common, that it wasn't a failure of policing or anything like that. It was political correctness that was to blame. And as a result, look what's happened. I mean, let's just read that again. The rise of Islamophobia in Rotherham. The people of Rotherham have been subjected to vile abuse on the streets, in schools, in the town centre, bomb threats to mosques, 14 far-right demonstrations within a year, radicalising a local community, innocent taxi drivers forced into intensive care units, and the murder of an 81-year-old grandfather. That wasn't caused... this was all caused by the far right and people like Britain First and people like Tommy Robinson, going after the Muslim community in Rotherham. I've said it before. You have Tommy Robinson has a video where he literally points it down the street and there's a mosque and there's all these rows of houses and he literally says, look, all these people on this street are enemy combatants. If you're a member of this far-right organisation, what do you think's going to happen? Of course you're going to be motivated into violence against these people. And the damage has been done. And it will take years for this to, seep away. Because it's not going anywhere anytime fast. And you still have people like Tommy Robinson, Britain First, going to Rotherham continuously on a daily basis and using this as an excuse to attack the Muslim community, not only in Rotherham, but basically to whip up Islamophobia everywhere in the UK. And I talked about this before, but people just don't believe me when this stuff happens. And then when this retaliatory stuff happens, you know, I think it's the total, I think is about 5 taxi drivers in Rotherham have been attacked. And one was so badly beaten he got sent to an intensive care unit. This considered, bar the Rotherham Advertiser, I don't think any of this stuff actually goes out to a wider audience and, you know, is covered on a wider scale. But that's the problem, you know, Rotherham's now facing. And I wouldn't surprise me if this is going on in other Muslim communities around the UK. It doesn't surprise me. So that's where you are with this situation. This is why, again, a couple of last year, I made all those videos targeting Tommy Robinson, calling him out for doing this. But people defended him, saying, oh, he's only bringing light to the child sexual exploitation. Well, you know what, him doing that and his dog whistling for doing that calls out, it results in the death of the murder of an 81-year-old man. It results in constant racial abuse being thrown. It results in a bomb threat to mosques. It results in 14 far-right demonstrations within a year. What do you know? Of course, this is going to radicalise people. Mostly on the far-right side. But that's what happens when people like Tommy Robinson just go out there unchallenged and idiots just believe him.